Hi, my name is Ken Davis and this is the Ken and Phil's Health and Safety Podcast. This is a podcast that's aimed for our partners and supply chain and giving them a little bit of access to informal health and safety chats and informal health and safety topics. Today's podcast is titled Risk Quantification.
Oh, quantification. So that sounds a very big word, Ken.
Yeah, well, we're talking about risk assessment, essentially,
Right.
Phil. So risk assessment has been with us in health and safety circles, believe it or not, since the 80s. Formal risk assessment, that is. So back in 89, there was some new UK legislation that hit us, the cost regs, noise, lead. They all require you to do a formal risk assessment based on identifying what the hazard is and quantifying the risk. Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily in 92 when
It's a very good
the
point that you
six-pack hit us from Europe.
make there, Ken. Can you just tell us what a hazard is, please?
Well, a hazard is something with the potential to cause harm.
Yeah.
And a risk is the likelihood that that harm will be realised.
Yeah.
So anybody doing a risk assessment needs to understand those 2 points. Otherwise, you're not technically competent. So what are we asking of employees, Phil?
Yeah.
You know, so bringing it up to date, 92, the management regs came out, formally requiring you to do a risk assessment. It's been revamped in 99. So it says where you've got foreseeable risks.
Yeah.
And where you've got significant risks.
Yeah.
They have to be written down.
Yeah. How would you define a significant risk for our listeners, please?
Yeah, it's a really good one, and really it does depend on your industry, really, and the understanding of your industry. So insignificant risks would be those things which you could deal with without needing to write something down. So if you've got a trailing cable across a corridor, if you've got a trailing cable across a corridor, I wouldn't expect anybody to think, let me go and get my risk assessment template and do a risk assessment. That is a risk that does need managing, but it's insignificant.
Yeah.
Like carrying a box of photocopying paper from the photocopying cupboard to the photocopier.
Yeah.
Only the NHS do risk assessments for that. I'm only joking. But that's not a significant risk. So it has to be foreseeable, so something that's likely to happen in your industry. So being struck by lightning is not a foreseeable risk, okay? It's 14 million to 1. So don't worry about doing risk assessment.
Would you go as far as, when we talk about significant hazard, obviously risk to life or loss of limb?
Yeah, but obviously a significant risk could be operating a machine, operating display screen equipment. You know, if you're a secretarial type person, manual handling, you know, these. So we've got to apply a bit of common sense here, and that's, I know that's not very common, but it's really important that we don't waste our time producing formal risk assessments where it's an insignificant risk. That's really important. Health and safety can very quickly become a pain in the backside.
Yeah.
If you're starting to produce risk assessments for everything. Yeah. And, you know, that's
would
only
you say
because
that
people
when
don't
you were doing
understand.
a risk assessment and you look at your 5 steps to a risk assessment, you've got to focus on the big hazard first?
Absolutely. Prioritising what is a significant hazard is really important. I mean, you could, at step 1 of the risk assessments, list all the things that you think are hazardous.
And then categorise.
And then basically you could say, well, these are clearly significant.
Yeah.
And you can work your way down that sort of priority list, can't you? I suppose. And then obviously getting some advice from certain people might sort of identify the ones which aren't significant. But let me just sort of clarify a couple of other things. So risk assessments then only should be done where there is a foreseeable risk, where there is a significant risk. And obviously what we're trying to do is to comply with the law. And the law wants us to reduce the risk to a tolerable one. And the risk assessment is the vehicle to prove that. Okay, so what's a tolerable level of risk? Here at the college, we have high, medium or low as our risk quantification.
Yeah.
Low and medium is tolerable.
Yeah.
If you're using a numbering system, it's
5
generally
by 5.
5 by 5, likelihood times consequence. You're looking at somewhere between half and less is tolerable.
Yeah.
So obviously 5 times 5 is 25. So you've got a sliding scale there of 1 to 25.
Yeah.
Anything below 12 would be considered tolerable.
Yeah.
But I have to say, if you're close to 12,
You're pushing it.
you're pushing it. What I'll be doing with that is make sure I review those risk assessments on a much more regular basis.
Could you use the risk hierarchy to look at, if you're touching 12, could you look at trying to reduce it in relation to
Absolutely. I mean,
risk hierarchy?
yeah, let's try and reduce all risks to as low as is reasonably practicable.
absolutely.
Without, it's got to be reasonably practical. We don't want anybody spending money they can't afford. No HSE inspector or no legislation is making you spend money that you can't afford. It's all based on what's reasonably practical. Mm-hmm. And then you've got, as you've said, you've got to review them. So we tend to review risk assessments annually, but that's not the case. What the law is requiring you to do is to review them depending on their level of risk. So if you're using the 5 times 5 matrix and it's 1 times 1, or you're using the low, medium and high quantification and it's low, I'd be happy to review that risk assessment in a couple of years, maybe even more.
Yeah.
Risks which are up near the 12 on the 5 times 5 matrix, or top end of medium on your low, medium and high quantification, I'd be reviewing those on a much regular basis than every 12 months.
Yeah. So one of the points that you touched on there was things that could potentially make you review your risk assessments. Can you just expand on that a bit for us, please?
Yeah, well, the risk assessments have got to be integrated into the company's activities.
Yeah.
And therefore, then, they need to be always current
Yeah.
and appropriate.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many businesses I go into and risk assessments have been done a couple of years ago and they've never been integrated. They're in pristine condition in the boss's office in a filing cabinet, but nobody has ever seen them.
Yeah.
So risk assessment is not a paper-generating exercise. It's for keeping people safe.
Yeah.
They're your primary control document.
Am I right in saying that in the Health and Safety at Work Act, you have to show your employees the risk assessment and how you propose to control the hazards?
Well, certainly in the management regs,
Yeah.
it's a legal requirement not only to produce risk assessments, but to bring those to the attention of your employees.
Consult with your employees.
Now, most organisations that I work with have a front page now, including the City of Wolverhampton College, that gets the employee who's at risk to sign to say they've read and understood that risk. And that's outstanding because that's discharging that legal duty.
Yeah.
If you've produced risk assessments and haven't brought it to the attention of the employee, well, that's
You're not doing anything there, right?
I mean, that's worse than not producing a risk assessment in my book, isn't it?
Yeah.
So risk assessment, then, it's good business because risk assessment is our primary tool to stop accidents from happening, to reduce dangerous occurrences, to reduce near misses.
Yeah.
So if you are quantifying and producing risk assessments for your significant risks within your business, which are foreseeable, you're going to be less exposed to things going wrong.
Yeah.
So, it's a great tool, not just for, legal compliance, but for your business. Remember, we've talked about culture. We've talked about people. They want to work for a company that looks after them.
Yeah.
And if you're exposing...
understands the hazards and puts countermeasures in place to control those hazards.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So, should we talk about what a risk assessment should look like?
Yeah, please.
So, column 1 of most risk assessments. I mean, obviously, you've got the ancillary stuff, the title, the activity, what it is, the department maybe, if it's a generic risk assessment. But keeping it sort of simplistic, there's a set of columns. There's probably 8 columns in most basic risk assessments. Column 1 identifies what the hazard is.
Yeah.
Hazard is something with the potential to cause harm. And remember, that hazard has got to be significant and foreseeable.
Can you just give us an indication of the different types of hazards? So we talk about
so
physical.
There's 6 different groups of hazard.
Yeah.
But there are hundreds of hazards that fit into those 6 broad groups. So let's see if I can remember them. Physical, mechanical, biological, psychosocial, substance,
I can't remember. No, it's gone.
Let's do it again. Come on.
Yeah.
Physical,
Yeah.
mechanical,
Yeah.
biological, substance, ergonomic,
Anthropometric.
and psychosocial. Okay, so hazards. Column 2, who should be affected?
Yeah.
We're not interested in somebody who is clearly not affected, and we don't ever hear in risk assessments somebody putting the word everybody
Yeah.
or all staff, because that's dead lazy.
It's not just staff, though, is it?
It could be who.
Yeah. It could be anybody else. It could
Like
be.
who?
It could be a visitor. It could be a cleaner. It could be a delivery person. Anybody else that's coming into your business, you have to make sure you factor them into
Well
your
done,
risk
Phil.
assessment.
Section 3 of the 74.
Yeah, I was just alluding to that, actually. Yeah. Section 2 talks about employees. Section 3 talks about anybody else.
Those who are not directly employed but are affected by
Yeah.
the undertakings, you've got to consider those, and vulnerable people, pregnant workers, young persons.
Yeah.
So that's column 2. Column 3, how they could be affected. I don't like that phrase. Obviously, what we're talking about there is maybe a column that says, it's an electrocution hazard, or it's a fall from heights hazard, or it's a scalding hazard. Okay, not critical, but the HSE have a template with that third column. Column 4 is where it really starts hotting up. This is why health and safety is sexy, Phil. Column 4 says, what's the current controls? So in column 4, you need to identify what's currently in place. And if those current controls are acceptable, i.e. driving down that level of risk to a tolerable one,
Is that
you don't have to go any
quantitative
further.
or qualitative risk assessment?
Well, yeah, there's basically 2 groups of risk assessment. One is based on words, one is based on numbers,
Yeah.
or a hybrid of the 2.
Yeah.
But, you look in this room, Phil, what controls are there? In terms of fire in this room, what controls have we got?
Fire extinguisher, fire alarm.
Yeah, where's can you see an extinguisher?
Probably not in here.
No extinguisher. There's an alarm system.
Yeah,
There's
an
a
alarm.
smoke detection
Yeah.
system. There's fire doors. There's compartmentalisation. You mentioned PAT testing.
Yeah.
It's probably inspected and cleaned on a regular basis. There's a sign on the wall there that says how to get out the building and where to muster. I'm a fire marshal, so those are all controls.
Yeah.
Okay. If those controls are adequate to manage the fire hazard,
Yeah.
we don't have to do anything else. Park the risk assessment there in column 4.
Yeah.
If the controls are inadequate and the risk in the assessor's opinion is still greater than tolerable,
Yeah.
you've got to go for some additional control measures.
Yeah.
Okay, so column 5 is what's the risk rating with the existing controls in place, low, medium, and high, or you might be using the quantitative system, the numbers, likelihood times severity. If, in your opinion or the assessor's opinion, it's still too great, you've got to go for additional control measures.
Yeah.
Column 6.
Is that using your risk hierarchy to reduce?
Well done. Yeah, the hierarchy of control measures gives you a guide on what are the best controls.
Yeah.
So we go about, or it talks about trying to eliminate the hazard. Now, could you eliminate a fire hazard in this college? You can't. It's impossible.
It's a lot of variables.
In an ideal world,
Yeah.
we'd like to eliminate the hazard.
Yeah.
So if you're working with a harmful substance, we can replace it with a harmless. If you're working at heights, we can replace you with making sure you don't work at heights. But we can't really get rid of fire in a building, It'd be lovely if we can, but we can't. So that's your best choice. Eliminate or reduce or substitute.
Yeah.
These are sort of like top-end sort of best choices. We then get down towards things like preventing contact, so guarding, then admin controls, and then ultimately PPE.
Yeah.
Now, the bottom end of the hierarchy of controls, like PPE and admin,
Yeah.
they're requiring people to do things. And guess what? The root cause of every accident is human error.
Yeah.
So we don't want humans doing things. We don't rely on our employees to put PPE on or to read a sign or to read a data sheet or to read a standard operating procedure or a safe system of work, because sooner or later they'll forget what it says, or they'll be distracted.
Yeah.
So column 6 then, additional controls, things that are going to enhance the controls, reduce the level of risk. So we then have to quantify the risk again, obviously, and if it's now back into that tolerable level, happy days. We park that risk assessment and make sure that we put a sensible review date on it, not just every 12 months. Obviously, you could argue that most risk assessments do have a who's going to do these additional control measures and by when. So if you're asking for a bit of spend, somebody's got to buy a guard, or somebody's got to put a sign up, or somebody's got to buy a new laptop or a new piece of tooling, they're going to have to, somebody's going to be actioned to buy that and to close out that control. Okay. So that's in a nutshell, Phil. Risk assessment or risk quantification. What I should say is that all regs these days are risk-based. So it doesn't matter what it is. Since 1992, every health and safety regulation requires you to quantify significant and foreseeable risks written down on a risk assessment.
Yeah.
Okay. If you employ less than 5, they don't have to be written down.
No. But then you can use HSE as a reference, can't you?
Well, it doesn't mean to say that you can ignore them. You're absolutely right. Yeah. If you employ less than 5 people, you've got to make sure that they are verbalised. So you talk about the risk and talk about how you're going to control that risk.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to sort of make it too onerous on organisations that don't have much
resource. Use an ACOP for something like that to say as a benchmark the ACOP and then...
Well, the ACOP to the management regs, it suggests this, clearly it's and the management regs is, so absolutely right. We're not asking anybody in a small organisation to be producing endless amounts of risk assessments. That's not what it's all about. Lofsted was brought in 2015, I think, or 2014 to sort of rationalise and make health and safety not onerous, but enhance businesses.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well done. You've been a tour de force.
Thank you very much, Ken.
And I'll say, on that note, we'll obviously sign off. Thanks very much. Hi, thanks very much for having us. Hope you've enjoyed our podcast today. Ken and Phil's health and safety podcast. Obviously, it's designed for our suppliers and our partners to get access to health and safety and more formal training if you need it. You can reach us on our website, which is www.wolfcoal.ac.uk.